The 6 I have, and now.
Huh?
7.
For 20 years, JRPG fans have been playing the game of spiritual successor bingo. Every time a new turn-based game drops, we ask the same question. Is this the one? Is this the game that finally captures the soul of the 90s era? For a while, we thought it was Lost Odyssey. Then we pinned our hopes on Bravely Default or Octopath Traveler. But when Hironobu Sakaguchi, the man who literally dreamt up Final Fantasy, announced that he was teaming up with the legendary Nobuo Uematsu for a diorama-based adventure, the conversation shifted. The creator was returning to the throne. I'll be honest, I went in with tempered expectations. I'm a sci-fi nut, and seeing the first cutscene composed of mechanical cities and interdimensional rifts hooked me in. But because it started as an Apple Arcade exclusive, I had this nagging fear it would feel light, something closer to Final Fantasy XV Pocket Edition than a sprawling epic. I was wrong. For the first 20 hours, Fantasian wasn't just good for a mobile game, it was a masterpiece. It felt like a 10 out of 10 reimagining of the JRPG formula, blending a high production sci-fi aesthetic with the tactile handmade beauty of physical dioramas. But after finishing most of Fantasian, I realized something strange. The game doesn't just remind me of classic Final Fantasy. It suffers from the same problems modern Final Fantasy has been struggling with. The same problem that divided players when Final Fantasy XVI released. A game with incredible moments, beautiful world building, and flashes of brilliance that slowly loses its identity along the way. There is a pervasive myth in modern gaming that linear equals bad and open equals freedom. We've been conditioned to think that being shoved down a hallway is the technical limitation, while a wide open world is narrative evolution. Fantasian is the ultimate proof that the opposite is often true. Today I want to talk about the heartbreak I received while playing Fantasian. I want to analyze why the shift from a focused high-stakes narrative in Part 1 to a Final Fantasy VI Ruined World-esque boss rush in Part 2 killed the soul of the game. Much like the divided reception of Final Fantasy XVI, Fantasian suffers from a structural identity crisis. It's a game that proves that linearity isn't a dirty word. Sometimes it's the only thing keeping a story worth telling from falling apart. When I first stepped onto the Uzra, that's when it hit me. In the late 90s to the early 2000s, we had pre-rendered backgrounds because the hardware couldn't handle full 3D. Fantasian uses dioramas because they want that handcrafted soul. It feels tactile, expensive, and incredibly unique. Part 1 is a masterclass in focus. You have Leo, who, let's be real, looks like he walked right out of Nier Automata. He's a bit of a blank slate, an amnesiac hero with a personality that's serviceable at best, but it works because the world around him is so vibrant. The mystery of his father and mother provides a clear high-stakes narrative incentive. And then there's the emotional hook, the love triangle. Kina is your Aerith, the ethereal connection, the magical essence. Cheryl is the Tifa, stronger and perhaps more grounded. After seeing how Final Fantasy VII Remake fleshed out the chemistry between Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith, I was ready for Fantasian to take that ball and run with it. In Part 1, it felt like it was building towards something profound, a sci-fi fantasy blend that actually cared about its heart. Even the dimension mechanic felt like a gift at first. It respected my time. I could bank those pesky random encounters and then unleash a symphony of curved path attacks in one glorious wave. It felt snappy and strategic, and then the game wanted to test me. It gave me the L'Orange Wind boss fight. That fight was a nightmare, moving phases, shifting tactics, pure frustration. But when I won, I felt like I actually accomplished something. It was a milestone in the narrative journey. It was peak JRPG. Then Part 2 happens. Sakaguchi clearly wanted to recreate the magic of Final Fantasy VI World of Ruin. He wanted to give the player total agency. The world is broken. Your friends are gone. Go find them in any order you want. On paper, that sounds like the ultimate player freedom fantasy. In reality, it's a narrative death sentence. The moment Fantasian lost its linearity, it lost its soul. When a developer gives you the freedom to do missions in any order, they lose the ability to write a cohesive, escalating story. The promising love triangle, it basically vanished. The tension evaporated because the writers couldn't guarantee when you'd see certain characters or what you know by the time you found them. The mystery of Leo's past, the very thing that kept me glued to the screen, became a background hum. This is where I have to get controversial. Final Fantasy XIII was right. Final Fantasy XIII gets dragged through the mud for being a hallway simulator. But that linearity served a purpose. It kept the stakes high. It kept the characters in a state of constant, forward-moving pressure. You always knew why you were running. In Fantasian Part 2, that pressure is gone. It's been replaced by a boss rush structure where the narrative importance is non-existent. You aren't exploring a world. You're moving from one gimmick-filled encounter to the next. The game stopped being a journey and started being a series of chores. It's the worst kind of open-ended design. The kind that trades emotional resonance for a longer playtime. The difficulty spike in Fantasian's Part 2 is legendary, but it's often discussed for the wrong reasons. People call it the Dark Souls of JRPGs, but that's just a surface level comparison. In Dark Souls, skill can overcome a lack of preparation. In Fantasian's Part 2, the game stops being a strategic battle and starts being a puzzle with a game over screen. If you don't have the exact right equipment, the exact specific immunity, or the exact sequence of turns the developer intended, you aren't just challenged, you're walled. It's a prescriptive difficulty. It's no longer about my party or my playstyle, it's about me guessing the developer's intentions. And because the world is now open, the dimension, the very mechanic I praised, turns into a chore. You're backtracking through old dioramas to find your scattered party, but because you're no longer on a linear path, you're just fighting the same waves of mobs over and over. What felt like a time saver in Part 1 becomes a grind fest in Part 2. By the time I reached Shadow of Yim, the burnout was in total effect. I wasn't playing for the story anymore because the story had stopped moving. I was min-maxing out of a sense of obligation, not joy. The narrative substance had evaporated and replaced by a boss rush grind that felt like it was padding the runtime of a mobile-first experience. I consider Fantasian to be in the same boat as Final Fantasy XVI. Both are serviceable JRPGs that have moments of absolute brilliance, but both suffer from an identity crisis. They want to be modern, they want to be epic, but they struggle to maintain the soul of the classics they're trying to emulate. If Part 2 didn't exist, if Fantasian had stayed a focused 20-hour linear adventure, it would be an 8 out of 10, or even a 9 out of 10 for me, but as a complete package, it's unfortunately a 6 out of 10. I stopped at Shadow of Yim because I didn't want to ruin my perception of the game. I didn't want my final memory of Fantasian to be frustration and burnout. I wanted to remember traveling Vibra on the Uzra. I wanted to remember the mystery. I wanted to remember the 10 out of 10 feeling I had in the first 15 hours. Sometimes not finishing a game is the right choice. We live in an era where more content is equated with better value, but Fantasian proves that a narrative thrives under constraint. Part 1 proved that linear JRPG design still works, better than almost anything else. Part 2 proved that without focus, even the best world building can fall apart. Fantasian might be the most frustrating JRPG I've played in years. Not because it's bad, but because Part 1 proves how incredible it could have been. And I'm okay with leaving it behind to preserve the part of it that I loved.